A list of Donald Trump's vice presidential picks offers a first glimpse and a real sign of the individuals that are actually in the running as VP picks. Now, there are 8 conservative figures in this list, and I think who didn't make it on the list is also really interesting. So let's start off with the so-called shortlist. You have, in no particular order, Tom Cotton, Marco Rubio, which I just can't see. I feel like Donald Trump is trolling Marco Rubio, and it's a little bit funny.
No, I think I have a sense of why he's on the list. Because Donald Trump, and this is a big part of the story, has been going around trying to please giant donors. So the VP list is a lot of, I could pick Marco Rubio, and you guys know Marco Rubio will do anything for donors, right? So there's a lot of that, and that's going to lead to who I think is the actual 3 that are the most likely. But let's give you the rest of the list. So
the rest of the list includes J.D. Vance, Tim Scott, Byron Donalds, who's actually been making headlines recently, Elise Stefanik, who has no interest in governing and all the interest in political theater with all the hearings that she's been engaged in, Doug Burgum, who's the most boring man in the planet and definitely would not outshine Donald Trump, so I think he's definitely in the running. And then you have Ben Carson, who's also incredibly boring. Soft speaker, slow speaker, usually looks like he's falling asleep. Certainly will not take any limelight away from Trump. You just have to think about who Trump is as a person. Yes, he's gonna pick someone who's politically advantageous for his campaign, but I think he's also concerned about choosing someone who might grab a little too much attention.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you. Yeah, so there's a couple of different notes here on the list. And again, we gotta get to the people not on the list, that's super interesting too. So first of all, there's 3 black folks on the list, if I'm counting right. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, yep. So that's Trump saying, I think I can get a bigger percentage of the black vote than other Republicans have in the past.
I think he can.
And enough to swing the election. So that's interesting. Number 2, the neocons and the establishment figures on the list are interesting, and I think the ones most likely to be picked. So that is Tom Cotton, Elise Stefanik, and Tim Scott and Marco Rubio are also on that list, but Tim Scott's solidly on that list. J.D. Vance is kind of a wild card. He'll do anything a donor tells him to do, but he's got theoretically populist streak. I mean, they're not, they're all fake populists anyway. So to me, I think he's definitely going to go with someone at least authorized by the donors. And so I got a wild card in here that has some chance of getting picked, and that I really like, and that's going to surprise you guys.
That you really like?
Look, among the murderers row of terrible people on this list, there's one I would definitely pick over the others.
Oh, that's interesting, okay.
All right, I'm gonna get to that in a second. But let's talk about the people not on the list.
Yeah, listen, I'm not a huge fan of most of these people. Let's just be real about that. But at the same time, there are people on the didn't make it list that I'm really glad didn't make it. So that, in that list, you have Vivek Ramaswamy, Kristi Noem, who I think was excluded for obvious reasons, all the lies in her books and the fact that she had those terrible interviews following getting caught in those lies.
But mainly for murdering a dog.
I mean, yeah, Americans like dogs.
That's the one thing that Americans agree on.
Yes, you have Nikki Haley, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm so glad that she's not getting chosen. Same with Tulsi Gabbard, very happy that she's no longer in the running. I had predicted that she was going to be his VP pick. That was a bad prediction, and I'm very happy that I was wrong. Then you also have Tucker Carlson, who again, very happy he didn't make it on the short list.
Yeah, and then there's Carrie Lake. Carrie Lake didn't even make our list of the people who didn't make the list. And I had her at number 1 for a long time.
She's struggling in her Senate race.
Yeah, so I thought he was likely to pick a woman, Carrie Lake, Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Kristi Noem. I thought this was a while back, a couple of months ago. And that he's so obsessed with looks that he would lean in a certain direction. I shouldn't say anything more. I think you might get a sense of that. Anyways, it turns out he's not going in that direction. And so this is an interesting list. I think that there are a couple of factors. As I said, donors are a huge factor. And as I've said before, at the end, he's gonna pick based on what happens 5 minutes before this election. So that's the kind of fickle, idiotic guy that he is. George W. Bush was similar, but Bush got headlocked by Cheney early in the process. That was such a legendary move. He puts Dick Cheney in charge of picking the vice president. Dick Cheney picks himself. That's amazing, okay? Anyways, yeah.
Before you go on, because I don't want us to forget this point, I have to make a comment about a quote that was given to Politico, because this should not, in my opinion, this should not have been printed, okay? This is what it says, graphic 4. Trump likes people who are rich and have hot wives. One person not associated with the campaign, but closely following the vetting process, told Politico.
I'll tell you what that means. That's a donor.
That means that has no merit and is not a credible quote.
No. It could be a donor. So not associated with the campaign, but closely following the vetting process.
It could also not be a donor, and it could be a Democrat who's just carefully following everything that Trump is doing in terms of VP picks.
If that's true, Politico ought to be super embarrassed for writing that. So anyways, look, the fact that the donors help pick the candidate and then the vice presidential nominee, et cetera, is awful, and is clearly a huge reality in America. It's been a reality for Democrats and Republicans for a long time. Anyways, in this case, my pick for, if I had it my way, who would be VP? Doug Burgum, landslide. Okay, so why?
Why?
Okay, so I watched the debates and I watched them carefully. Doug Burgum is not insane. And so first of all, on not insane alone, he vaults to the top of the list, okay? Number 2, he's a successful businessman, not a guy who plays a successful businessman on TV like Trump. So he had to actually live in the real world and deal with real world consequences to actions. So does that mean businessmen would be great candidates? Not necessarily. But remember, most of these people on the Republican list are totally detached from reality. So the fact that he had to live in reality and realize that there are ups and downs to different decisions, and decisions are not black and white, those are all relevant. He did a decent job in North Dakota, and so that's my job to be honest with you on that. And he's complicated on climate change. He loves the oil companies. So if you want to say he's corrupt on that, especially with how much oil they've gotten out of North Dakota, totally fair. On the other hand, he's not like a robot on climate change, and I had an interesting discussion about it. Again, these are it's the lowest bar in the world, but if you have rational thoughts within the Republican Party, you're in the top 2%. So I take Burgum in a second. I think that if something happened in Trump, Burgum would be able to dock the ship without, like Tom Cotton, total fascist. I'd be very worried what Tom Cotton would do if he was president.
He would totally enable Donald Trump to implement martial law to get his way. I just see Tom Cotton as that type of figure. So out of that list, I think the individual that I would be the most concerned about would be Tom Cotton. I'm actually, you know what? You never cease to surprise me, Cenk. Doug Burgum is such to me personally an uninteresting political figure that I just couldn't get myself to really dig into his political career or what he accomplished in life. But what you're saying is interesting, and he seems like an unoffensive kind of guy for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, look, one last thing about it. When you, unfortunately these days in American politics, most politicians say the most absurd things, and they say it based on talking points or what donors want. It's what the propaganda that mainstream media is doing. There are lots of different factors, but they all look like robots. They all look fake. We've talked 1,000 times about how Trump is not honest, but he has the air of authenticity, and that's why it's a huge advantage for him, right? But so in that toxic cesspool, the fact that Burgum can have an intelligent conversation that doesn't sound like a robot written out for him ahead of time by a lobbyist is, like I said, it's a super low bar, but he clears it easily and way above the rest of them. Like Elise Stefanik is a great example of donor robot. They just wind her up, and then she comes in and goes, we must give all of our money to Israel and drug companies and oil companies. They are the greatest. Anyone who protests them should be arrested and kicked out of the country. Move along, move along. You're an uninteresting, terrible, despicable, immoral person.
Yeah.
Which I can't say that for Burgum yet.
So
That's the best I got on a Republican, not bad.
So the reason why we know these various political figures made it on this list is because the Trump campaign has requested the financial and biographical information of these people. They're vetting them. You wouldn't be vetting them unless you're genuinely considering them as your VP pick. But I do also want to say, while it is premature to say hashtag Cenk was right, so far, a prediction he made on this show is headed in an okay direction. Let's watch.
It's the donors who want an establishment VP. And so Trump is thinking, well, if they're gonna give me money and the VP doesn't really matter too much, sure, I'll pick one of your scrubs. So who do you have? And among the scrubs that he has, among the establishment guys, yeah, there's Elise Stefanik, there's Nikki Haley, there's Tom Cotton, and Tom Cotton is both militaristic in a way that Trump likes and is fascist in a way that Trump likes, but is also a giant neocon and pro-establishment. So he checks off a bunch of boxes.
So obviously Tom Cotton is on that list. You mentioned neocon. You see Donald Trump as a neocon?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
But Trump
the donors would want a neocon.
Yeah, donors definitely want a neocon. And in fact, since they're not sure about Trump, like Trump will do anything that you pay him for. Later in the show, we're gonna talk about how one donor is considering giving him $90 million to let Israel annex the West Bank. And Trump will do that in a second. He's like, where's the check? But on the other hand, if Hamas came to him and said, here's $100 million, we want to annex Israel, he'd be like, okay, fine, who's got more money, right? So the neocons are upset about that. They're like, well, I don't like, yeah, we're bribing him and it's easy, but I mean, he's fickle, right? Whereas somebody like Elise Stefanik and Tom Cotton are 100% controlled, 100%. They will do exactly as the donors order them, and they're already neocons, so they don't need it. So look, I appreciate that you're giving me credit for that. I think that's a relative layup in this case. But remember, I thought Kari Lake and Kristi Noem would lead, and they didn't even come close to the list.
True.
So I was also wrong about that. So it's a mixed bag. Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.